So, why fertility empowerment? For me, I came from a very fertile family. My mom, my sister, everybody in my family has like 5 kids, and they start when they're young. And I was actually looking back in the records from my ancestry, and they all had like 10 and 15 kids, amazingly. So I needed to empower myself from a young age. Also, when I had been on birth control of different kinds, and I tried different kinds, my sex drive would just go away. So it kind of defeated the purpose. I was on birth control, but the birth control was a lot that I didn't want to have sex. So that was kind of defeating the purpose for me of being on birth control. So I needed to find something that would be more empowering. And I think it's really important at this point in our culture. There's so much controversy going on right now around abortion, around even just education, around women's right to choose, and that's all coming up right now in the culture. So the thing is that if you're empowered, if you know your body, if you know how to work with your body naturally, then no one can take that away from you, no matter what happens with the legal system. So I think it's really important for women to be empowered. Also, disrupting your hormones is a big deal. It really, as a woman, it can really throw off so many things. It can throw off your weight. It can throw off your sex drive, like I said. It can throw off your health. Disrupting a woman's hormones, it's like we're really ruled by our hormones. So, and that's what, birth control pills artificially regulate your hormones. Hi. And so that, that's not ideal. It's like, if it's all you have, then I'm like, great that we have birth control. But we can do it without, we can, I've been using fertility awareness and other, herbal methods of birth control for over a decade, and it's worked great for me. So I feel confident that it does work for women, and that's why I'm teaching this class. Otherwise, I would never teach you to do something that I didn't know if it worked or not. But you do have to follow it. How much it works is how much basically how well you know your body, how well you know your cycle is how well it works for you. So that's an important piece. Also, I've heard some research about how being on, having your cycle regulated artificially with birth control can change things like even your sense of smell, of pheromones. Like you don't have the same, you're not, for example, you might not be attracted to the same person you would be attracted to when you're on artificial, regulation of your hormones like birth control, as you would if you had your natural cycle. Because your hormones are intelligent, your body's intelligent, and it has a lot of wisdom there. And when we start messing with it, it can throw things off. And so I've heard that your sense of smell can be changed, and as far as pheromones and who your partner would end up being. And when I look back on my life, I'm like, oh yeah, when I was on birth control, I had the worst partner ever. Not saying that would be everyone else's experience, but it did seem to make sense for me. And there's just, I think that there's really an undervaluing of our natural cycle in our culture, because traditionally the bleeding time was a visionary time. It was a time for going inward, for getting information for ourselves, for our lives, for the collective. And, we've really lost culturally that sense of the value of what, a woman's cycle has value. The entire cycle from the, ovulation to the bleeding time, it's a wave, and our hormones are different, and our consciousness is different. And there's different each week of that cycle, each day really, your hormones change slightly, and each week of that cycle is a prime time for a different kind of consciousness and a different kind of superpowers that come from that. And so when we don't have that, we actually lose something that's valuable. And it's something we don't have forever. At a certain point in time, we go through menopause and we don't bleed anymore. We don't have that same cycle. And so really being able to look at the body as containing a lot of natural wisdom and to learn from it as a teacher, I think is also an important part of that we don't necessarily get in our culture. So it's also a time for self-nurturing. The moon time or bleeding time is a time for cleansing. The body naturally cleanses. I mean, imagine if you're not bleeding as a woman, your body is naturally doing this cycle of cleansing every month. It's because it's good for our health to do that as women. And when we don't do that, we might be losing out on an opportunity for natural cleansing that we would not otherwise have. It's also a time of connection to the sensual and to the earth. When we bleed is a very grounding time, and as I said, also a time where we tend to be more meditative, tend to be able to access information in a different way than we can the rest of the month. So those are all good reasons to have your natural cycle. Also, fertility empowerment, I believe, is great for conscious conception. I really believe in conscious conception because I just love the idea that every child would be wanted and desired in the world, and to be and to consciously conceive a child. I just think, to be able to have our fertility be conscious, to be able to have our conception be conscious, I think is just, a wonderful ideal and a wonderful thing to be able to do. And that way we can do, for example, the cleansing we might need to, like, get our health ready to have a child, get our life ready to have a child, really prepare this very sacred space for calling in life. I think, it's just a great thing to, it doesn't always happen that way, and that's fine, but I think it can be something to aim for. So also in natural family planning, being able to space your children out. There's value in that. There's value in, potentially each child having a little more time with mom, or, a little bit more space between children for mom's health to recover before she has another baby. So you can use this information for all of these things, not just for birth control, but also for, optimizing your fertility if you're wanting to conceive. So those are some reasons why we would like to be empowered in our fertility. And then I just want to tell a little story. And this was the story that I think inspired this class. So I was sharing with Tiffany a good memory I have of using herbal birth control myself. And that was in my mid-20s, and I was dating the love of my life before Orion, and we were in that very passionate time of our relationship, and we were enjoying. I lived in Asheville, North Carolina, and I was studying herbalism and midwifery, and I was doing a lot of wildcrafting, a lot of going out and gathering herbs, and so my partner was with me, and we went out and we found this beautiful mountainside covered in wild carrot seed, which is one of the things I'm going to teach you about today. It's one of the best herbs for contraception, and so we spent the day gathering these, wild carrot seeds and filling up a big bag of them, and then afterwards we made love in the field, and then I had this, this was like my contraception for our relationship, which, lasted 2 or 3 years. And I would every month take these wild carrot seeds. And interestingly, when our relationship ended was the same time that the wild carrots, I finished those wild carrot seeds. So just an interesting little coincidence there. But it was a really sweet, I think, connection to, to using something that I had gathered myself for my own, contraception, and then also having my partner be part of the process in that way. And that's one thing I want to bring in about the Fertility Awareness Method, and really all the methods we're going to talk about today, is the Fertility Awareness Method is called a cooperative method of birth control. And that's because it's something that a man and woman can do together. A man can be empowered to know if a woman's fertile. I mean, he's not going to know as well as she does, because if she's tracking every day, but if he's doing that tracking with her, then he will know. But even if it's not a regular lover, he can know some of the subtle signs of if a woman's fertile or not. And he knows it biologically, he knows, but but he can consciously bring it, into consciousness, and that's what a lot of this is about: how to actually bring consciousness and choice to biology instead of just being ruled by this, mysterious thing that may seem to have our best interests at heart or may not at times. So we can have more of a cooperative experience with biology and more of a cooperative experience of choosing when to conceive as well. So that's why I said all genders are welcome to this class. I think it's great that we have a man here too, 2 men actually. And I think that's great because it's something that, everyone can, I think everyone should be empowered to know, their bodies, their lover's body, and choose when they want to conceive or not conceive, because it's such a huge, it's such a huge impact to one's life to have a child, and I think we should be able to be part of that process and that choice. So, Fertility Awareness Method. This is the main method that I used and has been used for decades by women. It's different than the withdrawal method. The withdrawal method this is more of a scientific method that you actually track your cycle and your fertility, so you get to really know your own fertility cycle. And it's a great method. It's highly effective and reliable form of birth control, more than 99% effective and reliable when followed properly. So that's a really high rate. That's as high of a rate as anything else out there. But when followed properly is a big, it's a big if, because it's really up to you. It's really up to how strict are you in following the protocol, And it's something that the longer you do it, actually, the less strict you have to be. Because in the beginning, you're just learning your cycle. And it takes, months of tracking for you. And then there's actually shortcuts you can start taking. Like in the actual book, there's shortcuts you can start taking once you actually know your cycle. So, so it can, it can feel like a lot in the beginning, which you'll see. I'm going to tell you the rules of it and what you have to follow in the beginning. But as I said, the longer you do it, the more it just becomes second nature. Like you know where you're at in your cycle. Like for me, I know when I've ovulated with pretty much like 90-something%. Like I know that moment that I ovulate because because I tracked my cycle for so long. And so it's not going to remain so much work, but you have to still, actually do it. It doesn't work if you don't actually do it. So the perfect use of fertility awareness method involves no sex or genital contact during your fertile time of your cycle, which is about a week. So that is the downside of the fertility awareness method. But what I'm going to share with you is what you can do so that you don't have to do that. Basically, the herbal contraceptive part. Like basically what I did was layer methods. Like, I'm going to give you 3 different methods that you can layer, and which I would recommend doing anyway. I would not recommend just using one form of natural birth control. I would recommend doing what I did, which is use 3. And then you have a little more leeway with this. Like if you're using wild carrot seed and able to use wild carrot seed, you can take that during the fertile window. That's the thing. And so that allows you to not have to abstain from sex during this fertile window. But, it's like if you wanted to make sure 100% that you weren't going to conceive, you might want to follow this so that you are abstaining completely. Like that's the fertility awareness method. But I'm going to give you some other things that you can use. Okay, so use at your own risk. I have to say this because it's something that involves so much of your personal willingness to track your cycle and to know your cycle and to choose what level of risk you want to take. Like I said, if you're just using one method, you're taking more risk than if you're using 2 or 3. If you're using these things in a really strict way, you're taking less risk than if you use them in a very casual way. So it's a very, you're taking responsibility for your fertility and, conception anytime you have sex, right? I mean, that's always a possibility. But especially if you're not, using the pill or whatever, you're taking responsibility. And I would say you're not necessarily taking any more risk. I'd say, using this system, if you're using it correctly, you're not. I mean, it's probably the same amount of risk, but you have to use it. You have to use it properly. And also, it's not as easy as just popping a pill. It's like we're in this culture where we just want to pop a pill. And, this might take a little bit more time initially, but it'll be worth it because you'll be getting to know your body. And then in the long run, and we're talking about, taking an extra 5 minutes a day, like compared to you still have to remember to take the birth control pill every day. So the amount of time that you're putting into this is minimal for what you get out of it. So a couple of books that I'm going to recommend. I do recommend if you want to really do this method in your life, get a book on it. Read it. It's like I had 2 books that I worked with. One is the classic, A Bible of Fertility Awareness, which is called Taking Charge of Your Fertility. And that's just the classic in this field. It's easy to find. It's on Amazon. Also, I like to use A Cooperative Method of Natural Birth Control, which is also another book. And that's nice because it's really thin. It's a super easy read. It's a good, easy reference for just the basic rules, because you want to keep refreshing your, every so often you want to keep refreshing. Oh, what are the, you get a new lover, you're like, what are the rules again? So I can, share them with him. And even before doing this class, I refreshed myself on the rules to make sure that I wasn't leaving anything out. It's always important to go back and, so those are the 2 books that I'd recommend. There's also this website online, fertilityfriday.com, and I thought that was a good basic guide for the basic rules when you're just starting out with this. So if you want to start this, I'm going to give you those rules today. But if you are not writing this down and you want a reference guide, go there. It has all the basic rules to get you started, and then I would also recommend reading a book. Yes?
I wonder if I could add a comment or write
Well, so I do want to get through the slides, so I do have a place for sharing and for questions. So if it can wait, let it wait. But if it seems like something you're going to forget or that you need clarity on right away, feel free to just, popcorn. Okay. Hope you remember. Okay, so 3 signs of fertility. This is in the Fertility Awareness Method. The first sign is body temperature. This is the biggest thing you're going to track when you're doing the Fertility Awareness Method. So you're going to use a digital basal body thermometer, and you're going to use it for your vulva. And I'm going to show you what one looks like in just a moment. They're easy to find. Most drugstores have them. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your temperature via your vulva the same time every day, first thing when you wake up. So ideally, before you get out of bed, before you move around, because you want to keep your temperature needs to be like a resting temperature. And so you have it like right next to your bed, and then the alarm goes off or whatever, ideally around the same time, and you grab it and you're like lay there half asleep and you start it and take your temperature. And then when you get up, you write it down in your chart. And usually if you buy a basal thermometer, they come with charts, or if not, you can find a place to download them online. And I believe they have apps nowadays too. So, okay, this is the first rule. Of the Fertility Awareness Method. You are infertile the evening of the 3rd consecutive day that your temperature has risen at least 3 degrees and remained high. So that is actually very important. This is how you know you've ovulated. So when you're charting, I'm going to show you a chart in a minute, but when you're charting your cycle, you write it down every day on a chart for charting your temperature. And what's going to happen is it's going to rise 3 degrees at least, 3 or 4, and then it's going to stay high. So you're going to see a big shift. It's not something you can really miss. It's like your temperature's low before you've ovulated, and then it's high after you've ovulated. I mean, it moves around, but it's generally you're going to see that shift happen. And you want to make sure, the reason you want to wait until the evening of the 3rd consecutive day after your temperature has risen is because you want to make sure it's going to stay high. You want to make sure it wasn't just like you had a fever or something, So when you're charting, that's how you'll know. This is the basal digital thermometer. Easy find. It says Walgreens on it. Some of them will say they're for tracking fertility. Some of them will just say basal digital thermometer like this. And so here's a sample chart. And your chart might not look this fancy. As you see, it's got the different feel of the cervical mucus, cervical fluid, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. But you can see how it's mostly down here, and then after ovulation around, which, for most women tends to be around day 14 of the cycle, then it rises and it stays up here. And you'll get to know your cycle as you track it. You'll get to know around how long your cycle is. So women's cycle typically a women's cycle is 28 days. But it can be shorter or it can be longer. It just depends on the woman and what point she is in her cycle. Like, I've experienced that as I've gotten older, my cycle gets shorter. My body's like, okay, we got to just maximize all the chances to get pregnant we can here. So it's like, it shortens, but it can shorten. But when I was younger, it was a little longer. So you'll get to know, but look for around day 14 of your cycle as the most likely time for ovulation to occur. And that day 1 is the first day you bleed. So you start tracking at day 1. So the second sign of fertility is cervical mucus or fluid. So this is how wet you are. And you're going to, when you're doing the Fertility Awareness Method, you're going to check to see how wet you are multiple times a day. So again, first thing in the morning when you're waking up and you're taking your temperature, you're also going to check and see if you're wet. You know, you want to check when you're not necessarily aroused because that can mask what's going on. It's just a different fluid. Arousal fluid is different than your fertility, fluid when you're not aroused. So you also want to check throughout the day. Whenever you use the bathroom is a convenient time. You can check before, and it sometimes is recommended to check before and after using the bathroom, and just, see what's there at the opening, go a little inside, and just notice the consistency of it, because you're also going to write that down on your chart. You're going to write down what the consistency is. And so the different consistencies can be dry, which is usually, if you're going to have any dry days, they're going to be right after you stop bleeding. So we're talking, day 5 to, you'll have some dry days, ideally. Unless you don't. If you don't have any dry days, then you have to be a little more careful with the system, because the dry days are like safe days. And if you've been checking throughout the day, you're like, yeah, I can confirm this is definitely a dry day. And then your cervical fluid will then change in consistency. When you start having cervical fluid, it will start out being sticky, pasty, opaque, white, creamy, lotiony. Those are all possibilities for your initial fluid, fertile fluid. And then as the month goes on, it'll have more spin. And spin means, I'll show you a photo of what these look like in a minute. So, spin means it gets more clear, it gets more stretchy. So you can actually, when you're like right about to ovulate, it'll be like your fluid will become stretchy to the point where you can like stretch it like far. You'll feel wet. You'll also notice that you'll feel wet. Like you go to the bathroom, you wipe, and you're like, oh, I still feel like I need to wipe again. Or you'll have like, potentially damp thighs, that kind of thing. Your underwear might get wet. That, you'll notice that you're feeling wet, ideally in the heightened part right before ovulation. And that usually, lasts for a few days before ovulation. At least. And the spin is your really fertile liquid. So that's your really fertile fluid. That's like ovulation is imminent. That's going to let you know. You're going to ovulate anytime now. So that is a big sign that ovulation is coming. So you want to be careful during all of the time that you have cervical fluid, but especially when, it gets stretchy and clear, because that's when it means you're most fertile of the month. And that'll be around, for most women, that would be like around day 12, 13, 14. Those are the days you generally will start seeing that. So keep in mind, all cervical mucus is fertile because it can keep sperm alive for 3 to 5 days. So there's a spectrum. It gets more fertile as you get closer to ovulation, but there is that window of where your cervical mucus fluid can keep sperm alive for 3 to 5 days. So here's just a photo that I found online. You can kind of see here is kind of more what your fluid will do when it's less fertile. It'll break, it'll be sticky, and then here, top picture, you can see when it's fertile. It's stretchy. And so I thought this was an even better picture from my book here, which I'll actually pass around. And this is a great resource, Hot Pants Do-It-Yourself Gynecology and Herbal Remedies, a zine that has been around forever on empowering yourself with your body around herbs. So here at the top you can see the mucus when it is sticky and breaks when it's stretched. That's gonna, right after, okay, it's like you bleed, and then you might have a few dry days, and then you'll start seeing this sticky mucus, and then it will go to more fertile mucus, and which is slightly stretchy, becomes a little more clear, becomes a little less sticky, and then goes to its most fertile when it is stretchy. And so here's an example of the stretchy, the spin factor. This is what it can look like in real life. So cervical mucus just prior to ovulation. And found that online too. Okay, so let's go into the fertility awareness rules. When you're first starting this out, you're going to want to follow these rules to a T until you really get to know your cycle and can start taking some of those steps out. Yeah. So before ovulation, you are fertile the evening of each dry day.
Infertile.
Oh, sorry. Infertile. Before ovulation, you are infertile the evening of each dry day. That is because sperm cannot survive without cervical mucus. So they're going to die pretty quick, like within, I don't know how quickly, but the body just is kind of built to just, it's not a conducive environment to sperm unless they're cervical fluid. So the day after intercourse should be considered a fertile day due to the presence of either semen, lubricant, or spermicide. So, yeah, if you have any fluid coming out of you that's not yours, that could definitely mask your own fluid and you figuring out whether it's fertile or not. You are infertile, okay, so that's before you ovulate. And then after you ovulate, you are infertile the evening of the 4th day after your peak day of cervical mucus. So you'll see on the charts when you're tracking, you're going to track your temperature, and then there's also going to be like somewhere to write if your fluid is dry, sticky, stretchy, you're going to want to write some of those notes. And so then you can see, like, when was my fluid the most fertile? And so then you can use that too to track, like, the evening of the 4th day after your peak day of fertile fluid is considered infertile. So you're going to look at the temperature along with your fluid. You're going to look at both of those things, and you're going to be conservative. Like, if one is saying it's okay and one is saying it's not okay, wait. So, and then I'm going to give you another, because there's 3 signs with the fertility awareness method. So I'm going to give you another sign you can check to see if you're fertile or not. So, and again, you can go to that website for these rules. You can also, the books that I recommended also have these rules in them. And that website also has information about how to come off the pill and start using this method. So that could be useful if you're wanting to transition. Oh. So the third sign is the feel of the cervix. So this is also a great thing to know, just to know your body. So you know, you can track your temperature, but you can also tell by, looking at your fluid, and also the feel of your cervix inside of you, if you're fertile or not. So what you do is, again, you can do this in the morning in bed. Just kind of pop your knees up and put your finger inside. And sometimes you have to go kind of deep. And if you have to go deep, that's a sign that you're not fertile, because your cervix moves. And what it does is, when you're not fertile, it's like higher up inside of you, and it's closed. And so it actually feels like the tip of your nose. So that's how hard it is. And so when you're feeling inside, that's what it would feel like. And you'd have to kind of reach up in there to be able to feel it if you're not fertile. Now, when you're fertile, it softens and it moves down and it opens. So the open is not that open. It's a dimple. You can feel like there's a little dimple there, and it's going to feel soft like your lips, and it's going to be a lot easier to feel it. And so that's, you want to, your temperature is the most important thing, then your fluid, and then the feel of your cervix, especially until you get to know how your cervix feels when it's fertile or not fertile, because it takes a while to fine-tune that ability to know what you feel like. But it is another, it's another thing to look at to make sure all of these things are in alignment, and then you can, feel more confident that you're not fertile or you are. So this is a big question. On your moon time, when you're bleeding, is it safe? Is it safe to have sex? Is it safe for the man to ejaculate? So the conservative rule is the first 3 days of menstruation or bleeding are considered infertile. And if you've observed a clear temperature shift confirming that you've ovulated. So this is once you've already started tracking your cycle, you've confirmed that your temperature rose at least 3 degrees and stayed high, so you did ovulate. And so then with the next moon time cycle, you can say, okay, at least the first 3 days are safe. And then after that, it really depends on your individual cycle. Some women have really short cycles, and during a short cycle, you could ovulate as early as day 8 or 9. So there are women out there who thought that they could not be careful on when they were bleeding, and they ended up pregnant. Sometimes over and over again, because it worked for other women, but it didn't work for them because they maybe had a shorter cycle. Maybe they only bleed for 3 days, or so they. So it can be really different depending on your own cycle. So you want to track it, and there are ways to work with this as you get to know your cycle more. You can have the first 5 days be safe, and if you know your cycle and you know that when you ovulate, you could potentially even stretch that out even more if you really know your cycle based on previous evidence. But this also gets a little tricky as we get older, because I've noticed that my body will, as we get older, your body can try to get you pregnant. Just a little FYI. It can be like, oh, there's a man around, let's ovulate. oh, it's like, oh, this is a man that I have good sex with. Let's ovulate. It can kind of, your body is like, your biology is pretty intelligent, and it is more likely, it will do things like it will wait until that lover is around to ovulate. That's happened to me. It's like, no, I'm not ovulating yet. No. Like your moon time can change depending on what's going on in your life. Well, your ovulation can change. So if you have a new lover, be conservative with this, because that can kind of throw things off too. Because that's strong biology happening there. So, and now we'll talk about it. Ejaculatory choice and mastery is also a really important part of this whole, idea of conscious conception and being able to choose when to conceive or not. So it's not just women, but there's also, a lot that men can do in this regard. So being able, for a man to be able to learn his body and be able to choose when to ejaculate or not, I think this stuff should really be taught in puberty to men and women so that they can have this kind of choice over their body. I mean, if it was taught to men, they would have that choice of whether to create a child. I mean, they play a big role in it. So they have a big opportunity to choose or not choose, depending on their how much they know and have worked with their body. So men in puberty, if they started doing this practices for ejaculatory choice and mastery, there would be no such thing as unplanned pregnancy. I mean, really, it could be that way. It could be that that they would train their bodies in a way that made it easy for them to choose or not choose. And that's really what a lot of ejaculatory choice and mastery is about. It's about like getting the habit and teaching your body, because our bodies, like, they're creatures of habit. They do things a certain way. Biology is also definitely controlling that big time, but we can consciously work with it, and we can, and so my partners practiced this for a long time, ejaculatory choice and mastery. So I do know that it is possible. And it definitely makes all of these systems a lot easier and safer to use, right? It also has added benefits of, if you know how to work with the energy and move it through your body, and this is something that women can learn too. Women can learn how to help their partner to be able to have ejaculatory choice and mastery, to be able to learn practices for that. And because the woman is a lot like in control of the energy sexually. And if she knows what she's doing, if she is able to feel and work with sexual energy consciously, she's going to be able to hugely help him or not. She can kind of like make it almost impossible for him to do these practices if she's not also, competent with sexual energy and with learning how to work with that. So being able to work with the energy of containing the energy and working with it without releasing it also can lead to full body multiple orgasms for both partners. And so I think that's another great reason to work with ejaculatory choice and mastery. Is definitely it adds to pleasure for both partners. It can add to the pleasure for both partners, and for men, to learn that they can have a full body experience and can be like a light bulb, moment that is actually possible. I know men who do practice that way, and it doesn't mean like you'll never ejaculate, because ejaculating occasionally can be good for a man, but and you can choose when to do that or not do that. and there's nothing wrong with ejaculation, just to say that. But as men get older, especially, ejaculating a lot can affect virility and health. So even prostate health can be affected by men ejaculating a lot. And with porn nowadays, I mean, it can be off the charts for men, where they're really, there's a lot of depletion that can be happening as men continue to practice that way as they get older. So, did you want to say anything in particular about that?
It's okay. I think it's fine.
Okay.
Look, some would state that you would want to ejaculate 3 times a day, where you look at least 3 times a week for prostate. A minimum of 3 times a week for ejaculation, but then if you do too much, then excessive.
Yeah, so I'm going to say a little bit more about this. My understanding from Taoist sexuality is that if a man is like 18 or in his early 20s, he can ejaculate 3 or 4 times a week, no problem. But as a man gets older, he wants to lower that. So, you know, a man in his 30s, it would be less. A man in his 40s, it would be less. And after a certain age, they say don't ejaculate at all for health and virility. And that may be different than, I mean, that sounds different than what you've heard.
That was mysticism, that you're talking about. It's a particular
Taoist sexual practices. Also in the Tantra world, I've actually known of cases where men have turned prostate cancer around by doing these practices. Like actually had been diagnosed with prostate cancer, did not go and get their prostate fried, worked with tantrics who knew these practices, who taught them these practices. They practiced it and they turned around their prostate cancer. Like there's multiple cases of this. So it's it's not been studied. Nobody's necessarily studied this, unfortunately. But anecdotally, I will say that in the Tantra world, people, like this, that's where you send people who have prostate cancer, and the medical system says, okay, we're just gonna, make it so we're just gonna fry your prostate, but there are things that can be done. So my feeling with that is that, I mean, I believe that there's some validity to the Taoist sexual practices and system and ways of working with sexual energy. We don't know any way of working with sexual energy in our Western culture. We just don't. And what I've seen with the Taoist and tantric practices of being able to have, hour-long full body orgasms, this stuff is real. People practice these practices and they experience these things, and so I think there's a lot of validity to it because I've seen it work for myself and for other people. So, but not to say that ejaculating is bad or we should never do it or anything like that. It's really about choice. It's a choice, ideally. So so I said 3 signs for fertility, and there's a 4th sign. So those are the 3 main signs: temperature, fluid, and your cervical position. But there is a 4th sign, which is your desire level, because unless you have a new partner, your desire level generally is going to rise, or your testosterone, which spikes your desire, is going to rise as your fertile fluid rises. So as your fertile fluid rises, your desire for sex is going to rise, and it's going to be at its peak when you're ovulating, or right before you ovulate. When that fertile mucus is really spinny and stretchy, that's when your desire is going to also be the strongest. So that's one of the challenges with this, any system really, is that the stronger your desire is, usually has to do with fertility. It also, your testosterone and desire will also spike right before you bleed. So literally right before you start bleeding, like a day or 2 before, it'll spike. And part of why it spikes during that time is because having sex will help bring on your bleeding. And if your body's like, okay, I'm ready, and it's almost like an emmenagogue or something, which is, I'm going to show you in a minute, it's like an herbal way of starting your bleeding. It also, sex will do that too. So your body's like, okay, I'm ready. Just want to let it all flow. And your testosterone will spike there. So twice a month you have that high testosterone, high desire, right before ovulation, or building up to ovulation, I should say, and then right before you bleed. And some systems for getting to know your body and your fertility cycle is a couple of books I'm going to recommend. 4 Seasons in 4 Weeks is one of the books. And this book is great because it's kind of easy to remember where you are, and it's easy to remember because the summer is the week right before you bleed, so you tend to be hot and feisty, and that is called the creative week in the Optimized Women system. And I love the Optimized Women system. Is my favorite system for tracking my fertility cycle in relation to my energy and what each time of my cycle is ideal for. So I love this book. She has every single day, like what you're going to be experiencing hormonally and what that is ideal for. So I love her work. So summer is the week before you bleed. That's also the creative phase. Fall in the 4 Seasons in 4 Weeks system is the week that you're bleeding. And this is great for men to know too, because it's like, I just tell Orion, like, honey, it's my fire week. And it's like, okay, that's why you're being like so feisty, And then fall is when you're bleeding, and which is the reflective phase in the Optimized Women. Winter is in the 4 Seasons system, is that week when you're coming out of bleeding and you're starting to become fertile again. And that's in Miranda Gray's system called the dynamic week. And this week is actually the week that your hormones are like a man's. Like, you get 1 week out of a month where you are like, dun, 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 I will get stuff done, like, and what? I'm sorry? Yes. So this is our dynamic phase. This is the like get stuff done week. This is the kind of, in my masculine, I'm in my solar feminine. And so you can accomplish a lot during this week. And then you go into the expressive phase. And where you ovulate is right here. When ovulation takes you from winter to spring. Yeah, it's like takes you from winter to spring. It takes you from dynamic to expressive. So it's like the peak of your cycle. And it's the peak of your energy for the whole month. It's like you're like, your energy builds during the dynamic phase. And when you get to that point of ovulation, you're like ready to party. You're like social. You're like, you want to go out. You want to wear your, red dress and your red shoes. And you want to like be really social. And like, you have the most energy. You have the most like joie de vivre during that part of your cycle. And so it's like a celebration time. It's a time to celebrate, woohoo, And then it dips a little. After you ovulate, it's like there's this little dip in your energy, and you're kind of your body. You can sometimes be a little sad, like your body's like a little like, oh, we didn't conceive. Like there's this little bit of like sadness that the body has, like, or whatever that's from. There's this little dip. And then, but then you have like, you still have that expressive phase, and they say this is like the phase where, you can like rule the world during your expressive phase. You can like be the CEO. You can be like the visionary who like changes the world and tells everyone these amazing visions for what you want. So this is a really, the dynamic phase and expressive phase, are really very external. They're external phases. And then you come back, and the creative phase and the summer phase, you start coming back in to your internal reflective time. And so check out these books, much more detailed information about that, but it's really good to know just kind of like what's going on hormonally, because when we're in our fertile years, it's amazing how much biology and fertility is ruling our lives. Like scientific research just shows like so much of what we choose to do is ruled by our hormones as women, because our hormones change every single day of our cycle. Every single day, our hormones are a little bit different. They're dramatically different from week to week. Actually, that's why there's 4 different names for these weeks, because they're like 4 different women. Like you're like 4 different women, all rolled up into one. And good for men to know this stuff too, because then they're a little more able to flow with our way of being. And we get a lot of different information. We get a lot of different information when when our hormones are low than when our hormones are off the charts. So we might be like, when we're ovulating, life is great, everything's wonderful, but then we get to go, into that underworld and kind of look at all the things that we're maybe not so happy with, maybe that we want to change, so we get both. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you can take the picture before I change it, go ahead. So the last little sign of ovulation is pain, actually. And some women experience this, different women experience this differently. As you get to know your cycle, you'll get to know how you experience the moment of ovulation. But the way I experience it is leading up to like the day before, when I'm really fertile, leading up to ovulation, one of my ovaries will start aching, like really intense aching, and it's always on one side, because you're going to, it's gonna be your egg is generally gonna come from either the right or the left, and it changes, and so it'll be like more on one side, and then yeah, why does nobody teach us this stuff? What does it mean? Yeah. What does it mean? We need to know these things. Otherwise, we're like, what? Why the heck am I in pain again? And some women bleed a little bit. Some women bleed a little bit with, can spot with ovulation. And then, so for me, it's like aching, and it gets more and more, the aching gets more and more and more intense. And then the moment of ovulation, it's like sharp pain. It's like, sharp pain. And then it aches again. But it's like that moment, there's this really sharp pain. So that's how, I can know, like, right at that moment when I've ovulated. I feel it. It's pretty physical for me. And it's, more intense for some women than others, so you may not feel it that intensely. But once you start noticing it, you may really like, oh, okay, that's what that was. Or, you may really start, as you tune into it, you might start feeling the signs more clearly.
So the woman that only has one ovary left, would you say it would be consistent every other month, or would you be ovulating from the same ovary consistently every month, because that's all she has left?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I would think the body would ovulate from the ovary that's there, but there could be like phantom pain on the other side sometimes. So that's an interesting question. I don't know if the answer to that. Okay, so we went through the 3 signs. We went through the 3 signs of the Fertility Awareness Method, and now we're going to look at 3 different ways to layer natural birth control. So the first is fertility awareness, and these other ones won't be as long. That was the big doozy. And then the second one is wild carrot, and taking that during that week that you're fertile. And if you know your cycle really well, and you know, like, you can even get it shorter, like you only have to take it for 5 days, you know, maybe only 3 days, depending on how well you know your cycle. But you're generally fertile for a week, depending on when you have sex too. If you're not having sex during that time, all of it, you don't have to take it the whole time. So wild carrot is the second, and then the third is amenagogues to start your bleeding if needed. So if fertility awareness fails, if wild carrot seed fails, which it probably won't unless you're not using it perfectly, but you know, let's say you're not using it perfectly and you don't start your bleeding, you don't start your moon time, and you're like, uh-oh, then I'm going to show you a system that you can use to bring your bleeding on, which is in the herbal world is called amenagogues. Herbs that bring on your moon time, your blood, are called amenagogues. Women have been using these things for thousands, more than thousands. Women have been using these things forever. Women historically, they were not just unaware of this stuff. I mean, they were using amenagogues in cultures where there was awareness. I'm gonna keep going, but you can come afterwards and ask me. Okay, so wild carrot seed and Queen Anne's lace. Yay! We love wild carrot seed. Okay. So what you're gonna do is chew up a teaspoon of wild carrot seed each fertile day as extra protection. You can take it with juice because it's really bitter, so you might want to down some juice after, but I would say chew it up. Make sure you get it nice and ground up. It's an herb. I'll show it to you. Actually, I have some pictures of it, so you'll get to see it, and I'll tell you how to harvest it yourself. But you can order this online. Most herb shops don't stock this. A few might, but generally you're going to have to find it online and order it. You know, order a pound or two to have it around. So another method, you can grind it up with like a hand mortar and pestle and then mix it with juice and down it if you don't want to actually taste the bitterness. Drink extra liquid. This herb is not poisonous, but it could be considered mildly toxic by some herbalists. So that's the reason you don't want to take it the whole month for birth control. Although some people do. Some people have taken this herb for the whole month. It doesn't have any known side effects, except you want to drink a little extra liquid when you're taking it because it could make you slightly constipated if you don't do that. So you want to take a little more liquid. You can also use the tincture form of it. You can order the tincture online and take 2 dropperfuls a day. It does, however, there's another plant that looks similar that is poisonous. So if you're harvesting it, I want you to have a good field guide with you and make sure you properly identify it. I will show you the difference actually between these 2 plants here. But hemlock is very poisonous and it looks similar to wild carrot. So, and the reason that wild carrot seed works is it makes the uterus slippery, which means that the sperm has a hard time, or the ovum, the fertilized sperm has a hard time attaching to the wall of your uterus. It makes your uterus slippery. So if there has been a union, it will just come out with the bleeding and the shedding of the lining, which happens naturally anyway. Women naturally actually conception happens a lot more than pregnancies or births. Conceptions happen and they just, it's actually hard. It takes a lot of things have to come together for a pregnancy to really happen. So fertilization naturally happens, and sometimes it just comes out with the shedding. So that is something that happens anyway, regardless of wild carrot. But it happens more easily. It definitely happens more with wild carrot because it makes the uterus more slippery so implantation can't happen. And there is research online of this working for women. If you follow this correctly, it should work for you. Worked for me for years. So now I'll tell you how to use wild carrot as your morning after pill. If you're just not using this as a regular thing that you're doing, but you just have an emergency and you don't want to go get the morning after pill and take it because it's going to throw your cycle and your hormones all off, and your charting is going to be like messed up for a little while. And so you can take the wild carrot seed as a morning after pill. Ideally, you want to take it within 12 hours of unprotected sex, or at least within 24 hours. And ideally, you want to take it for up to 3 days afterwards if you're using it just as a morning after pill. And it won't disrupt your hormones at all like the morning after pill will. Okay, contraindications. Should not be relied on for conception by women who are coming off the pill, on hormone replacement therapy, or women who've had an abortion, a miscarriage, or have given birth recently. This is because you need to use this after your normal cycle has returned. That's the same thing for fertility, the Fertility Awareness Method. You need to have a normal cycle. Your cycle needs to be regular for you to trust that this is going to work for you. So what you can do if your cycle is not regular is you can use Vitex herb. Take Vitex tincture every day until your cycle gets back on. And still keep charting through all of this. But yeah, Vitex should reestablish your normal cycle, pretty quickly, within a month or two, the most. Also, there's other contradictions. Women who've had a history of kidney or gallstones or a problem with estrogen, consult with an herbalist before using wild carrot seed. Estrogenic herbs should be avoided by anyone taking, I'm not able to see the bottom of my slide, Orion. I don't have this memorized. But the contraindications are on the Sister Zeus website as well. So, okay, thanks. Okay, so estrogenic herbs should be avoided by anyone taking birth control pills, other estrogen medications, or blood pressure medications. So those would be the contraindications. And then let's move on to harvesting wild carrot seed. So this is something that you harvest in late summer or fall. You can look for it in summer so you can see it in its full glory and identify where the patch is that you want to harvest from. One key identifying characteristic is a hairy stem. Just remember, Queen Anne has hairy legs. So that's going to differentiate it from, for example, hemlock or other things that look like it. The flower head, when ready for harvesting, curls into a bird's nest shape, making it quite easy to identify. I'll show you a picture of this. And what you're going to do is take some scissors and a bag with you. You're going to snip off the head and let it fall into the bag. And good harvesting etiquette, don't take all the seed heads and scatter some seeds to help ensure future supplies of the wild carrot. And then you just shake your bag, and that's going to let a lot of the seeds come off. And if you keep it in a dry place, in a paper bag, it's going to dry for you. And you should be able to keep that around and use it for a couple of years. If you order it online, same thing. You'll be able to keep it around and use it for a couple of years. So this is what she looks like. You've probably seen her around before. In the South, Queen Anne's lace is pretty common. And it's a pretty common plant, I would say, in general. So look for it. this summer. And the identifying characteristic is this little black dot in the middle. That's one way you can know too. Although not all Queen Anne's lace has that, but it is an identifying characteristic. And this is what it looks like when it's getting ready for harvest. So it starts curling inwards on itself. And you could start harvesting it there, actually. You could go ahead and start harvesting it there, but this is when it's fully dry. It's going to look like this. And so if you harvest it when it looks like this, it will dry for you in the bag and look like this. And, okay, so that's about wild carrot. And then we're going to talk about emmenagogues now. So this is the third form of birth control that you're layering. And this is for starting your moon or bleeding time, menstruation, naturally if it's late. And you can do this even if you don't think you're pregnant. If you're just like, your moon time is late and you're just like, you've been miserable for days or however long, and you're like, I just want, I want to shift into this part of my cycle, you can use an emmenagogue. There are lots of emmenagogues. Lots of herbs are emmenagogues. Parsley is an emmenagogue. You'd have to take high doses of it to have it work as an emmenagogue, but it is an emmenagogue. Traditional emmenagogues are pennyroyal tea. Is a very has quite a reputation historically because women couldn't get a hold of pennyroyal tea and they got a hold of the oil, and it was very dangerous, potentially deadly to ingest pennyroyal oil. So don't take the oil. Do the tea. You want it in, if you're going to use this, you want it in an herb form, and you want to make a tea out of it. You want to make an infusion, and what you want to do is you want to take a handful of pennyroyal herb, and you want to throw it in a quart jar, and you want to fill the quart jar with hot water, and you want to let it sit for a little while, and you want to just sip that throughout the day. Sip your quart infusion of pennyroyal tea throughout the day, and that should work as an emmenagogue for you to bring on your moon time. You may have to do it for, 3 to 5 days, depending.
Do you only drink the liquid, or you also drink?
You just drink the liquid. Yeah, just the liquid. It may only take a day or two to work, but it could take longer, depending on what's going on. Also, squaw vine. So this is something that we had in the South, where I grew up when I was studying herbalism in the Asheville Mountains. There was this little plant, and it was it was all over in the woods, and people would say, "Oh yeah, that's squaw vine," and it's called squaw vine because that's what the Native American women would use to bring on their moon times. If they are like, I don't want to have another kid right now, or I don't want to be pregnant right now, they would, or I just want to start my moon time now, they would just go out in the woods and they would pick the squaw vine and eat it, and it would bring on their moon time. And so I would do this when I lived in the mountains of Asheville, is I would go pick my squaw vine and eat it. And I don't actually know what the I only know the common name. So I don't know if that same herb is here. I don't know if that same plant is here. I don't know what it would be called here. But there are lots and lots of emmenagogues. So what I'm saying is there may be some local emmenagogues that the local women traditionally used for this. Okay, so, but what I'm going to recommend for you to use is easier to get a hold of than pennyroyal herb or squaw vine, is straight absorbic acid vitamin C. You can just use regular vitamin C if that's all you can get a hold of. But if you can get a hold of straight absorbic acid vitamin C, use that. So this is to start your moon time, your bleeding. 6 grams, 6,000 milligrams per day for 5 days. and your bleeding should start by the 6th or 7th day. Ideally, small, frequent doses are key to keeping a consistent level circulating in your body. So how this works is it makes your womb too acidic for the ovum to implant in the womb. Or, no, I should say, if it's already implanted. It actually can work that way too. It can actually also help keep implantation from happening, but wild carrot seed works better. But if there's already been implantation has happened, what happens is if you take the vitamin C, it will make your womb acidic, and then the ovum will go, this is not an ideal environment any longer. I'm out of here. So that's how the vitamin C works. Don't take it for more than 10 to 14 days at a time, 14 days max. Because again, it could be a little hard on your body to do this. If so, you want to, use it sparingly as needed.
Every 4 hours, your body will make sure you're out, will heat out every 4 hours. So take small doses, break it down to every 4 hours possible.
Yeah, that's the idea. It'll just keep it circulating in your body. Most women go to sleep at night though and don't worry about it, and it still works. But if you're really concerned, you could put a vitamin C tablet inside of you or a sprig of parsley inside of you. Those are some things that I've read that women do if they're really concerned about that. For me, I didn't even really do the small doses. I would do kind of larger doses, but try to do it 2 or 3 times a day, and it would always work for me. I'm telling you the optimal way to do it, just because it's, I want you to know. So the optimal dosage is to divide your total grams for the day into equal doses, equally spaced if possible. Take 500 milligrams every hour. You can take a tablet if you have it in tablet form. Take a tablet every hour. You can set your watch timer and have it remind you to go off and take your dose. So this is, if you're concerned that you might be pregnant, if you didn't follow everything perfectly, this is what you're going to do or use an herb. But I generally did use the vitamin C. What I would do is I would use both together a lot of the time. Like I might be drinking. I was really, I was like, I'm going to stay on top of this. I would be drinking my pennyroyal tea infusion, and I'd be taking my vitamin C. So I was like, if you get to this point where you're concerned, you want to be on top of it. So contraindications, not for people with kidney issues. Also, high doses of vitamin C can cause loose stools, so that's why you don't want to take it for more than 2 weeks at a time. Could be a little depleting. For more information, more about contraindications and more about just using vitamin C in this way, you can see Sister Zeus. A lot of good information about natural, birth control on their site. Lots of good information, but I didn't want to present all of it, everything that you can do for you. It's overwhelming. If you get on the internet, you start researching this stuff, there's so many different things that you could do. And so to me, these are the things that I used successfully for a long time, and it's and I think they're the most reliable in my, from my herbal experience, I would say they're the most reliable. So one other little thing that might be good to know about is neem oil, because you can use this in addition to all these other things as a spermicide, amazingly. Neem oil, you can order it online from Banyan Botanicals, for example, and instead of using a regular lube, use, if you're having unprotected sex, don't use oil with condoms, but if you're having unprotected sex and you want to use some kind of lubrication, you can use neem oil. Neem kills bacteria, it's antiviral, and it apparently kills sperm. So there's research being done in India on this because it's an herb from India. They're also making it into a suppository and using it for birth control in places in India, and it doesn't have the irritation and the chemicals that a regular spermicide would have. I would not recommend using this as your only form of birth control. I mean, I'm not saying it wouldn't work. It's like they're testing it in India. But I would personally use it in addition to these other things. And it could also help keep you from getting infections too, because of its antibacterial and antiviral properties. Okay, yay, I got through all of that information. I can share more, but I wanted to take some time and for questions, shares. I'd love to hear, anything that you all want to share about your experience or your concerns.
Thank you, Amber. So
Francis.
thank you. As somebody who's in like the late 20s now, this is really empowering. And I'm only going to speak right now for myself, so I know that everyone's story is different. I want to respect that in their opinions too. So I've had an experience on 2 different birth controls before any were mainstream, like the Nuva ring, and then I've had some like low dose something. I don't know, but I took the pill every day or whatever. And I didn't take either of them for that long, but I just didn't like how it made my body feel. I didn't like the weight gain, and actually kind of felt like my sex drive went down. And that just felt really odd to me and unnatural. So I'm really like against birth control for myself. Like I said, I respect other people's choices and their opinions. So I really like this education. This is really good, and I actually did learn about the herbal birth control. It was taught as part of my sex education, and I think one other time I learned about it too, maybe when I was around middle school age. So the concept is not new to me, which is great, which I'm happy for.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So where did you learn this?
In middle school, I was in San Diego area, so it must have come up somewhere in middle school, and then I may have learned about it slightly again in college, possibly.
That's awesome.
So it's not completely like in the dark, like I have heard it before. Definitely once or twice.
Great.
So it makes me really happy. So yeah, I just feel really empowered because like as a woman to like not know these things before, I was just like, wow, like I have this like my body's an ecosystem, it's an integrated system, and it's so empowering, and it's the truth of what my body's like naturally when I don't add or take these man-made things into it. So I feel really good. It is a lot of information, but so I might stick to condoms for a while if I have a long-term partner. I am asking right now, but it's very empowering, and like long-term, I can see myself implementing these things. Very powerful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
That's awesome to know that there's education going on in middle schools and high schools around this. That's what I would love to see happen. For more just fertility empowerment and conscious conception happening in the culture and that awareness around that. So that's great. And just put it out there. You can, if you start charting your cycle on your own, especially if you're wanting to call in a lover at some point, or, then it's like you get to know your body, and then, not specifically you, just anybody, and then and then when you have a lover, you're more, you already know, you don't have to try to be like figuring this out while you're having a new sexual partner that you might potentially conceive with, so.
So I've been off birth control, I feel, for about 9 years, since about 23. And, depending on what's going on in your life, there was a time, close to a year, where I was able to, nail it when I was ovulating, or started cementing the space. And, since, certain changes and, hormonal stuff, it's really, it's, depending on what transitions you are in life, what kind of awareness is where. But there is an app also called P-Tracker, or Period Tracker, something like that.
P-Tracker?
Yeah, Period Tracker.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of nice during the months that there was just so much happening that it was hard to carve out time to really, go in deep and see what was going on here. you too, again, what they were predicting in that app was actually pretty accurate. So
Cool.
yeah, that was kind of a nice like overlay.
Yeah.
And what else was I gonna say? Oh yeah, how do you pronounce the word
Amenagog.
Okay. So if you do have a month where your hormone stress-wise are just really erratic, would you recommend doing one of those? Or do you have to calm the system down and kind of balance the system first? Or would that put additional stress on your body if your hormones are really off?
I mean, it could put additional stress on your body, like taking the, vitamin C in such high doses, could put a little additional stress on your body. Probably not any more than drinking coffee every day. I mean, we put stress on our bodies all the time in all kinds of ways. I mean, vitamin C, there could be worse things for you than vitamin C, that's for sure. And it might be good for you too. It might help you deal with the stress. So. But I mean, if you're not used to taking any vitamin C and then you just take a lot, it could put a little bit of stress on your body. But it's a backup plan. I would say don't try not to need it every month. The vitamin C, because that's kind of like if you're doing the fertility awareness and you're doing the wild carrot, proactively, ideally you wouldn't need the vitamin C, like ever. But it would be like more like for if you were really, it was like you were really concerned and you really wanted to make sure that you weren't pregnant.
Yeah, I was more so addressing, so if you are practicing abstinence and you have a mom who's stressed hormones that are really hard to manage, would pennyroyal tea or some of the other, I actually took photos in that book, I found the pages on this.
Cool.
Would that, are there contraindications, like are there things to be aware of if you are having a really stressful month and you're not getting your period because of it?
Yeah.
And so would this be a good option, or would you want to balance the system first a little more so, or how?
Yeah, I wouldn't take vitamin C in that case. If you don't think you're pregnant, don't take the high levels of vitamin C to bring on your menstruation. Take an herbal emmenagogue. It's a little more gentle. It's going to be a little more gentle on your system. That's why you want to do the vitamin C with the herb, because the vitamin C is stronger. So what I would do is I would look at like research online emmenagogues and see what herbs are out there and develop a relationship with an herb. An emmenagogue is not going to be hard on your system. Emmenagogues are all good for you, really, and they're going to be nourishing you and nurturing your body. And they're also going to help bring on your moon time. So it's like you can develop, I found that herbs work best if you develop like a relationship with that particular plant as a like plant ally, as an herbal ally for your body. So just see what you resonate with the most. And that may be based on, well, what other things does this plant do? What other qualities does it have? Or it may just be an intuitive thing. Like, you may be like for me, it started out with peppermint. Peppermint felt like a really good plant ally for me. And so I started using that. And, and then it's like you plant it or you harvest it and you develop a relationship with that plant. And you can even tell the plant what you want it to do for you, And I think that can be I've had plant teachers show up in dreams and like teach me about them. And so I think there really is something to developing relationships with particular plants that will be allies for you in whatever you're wanting them for, including emmenagogues. Emmenagogues are a great category of plants that have lots of healing qualities.
Well, I haven't tracked my cycle in probably 20 years. So when I used to keep track of it when I was probably in my early 20s, and it was every biological form has they're in the lunar cycle. And I used to keep track, and I used to have it on my calendar. I could predict when my acne would start. I didn't keep track of my moods or anything else, but I'd say, acne is going to start on day 1, acne is going to stop on day 5, and I would always predict it with no more than a day off. If typically it was right on. But I didn't see as much function for myself to keep track of my moon for me. So otherwise, I used to bleed from my nose maybe twice a month, so I didn't keep track if that was in sync. But I think blood lilies must differ some way in the body for everybody one way or another. Some people are more sensitive to it or not. But for just hormonal changes, it's easy to keep track with the moon for both men and women, I think.
Yeah, so this is something I'm interested in. As I've heard men say that they feel like they have a cycle too, but I don't really like. So you felt it in relation to the moon in particular?
Yeah, well, it'd be a 20-day cycle. So I would keep track of my, like I said, the most consistent external way to observe it was through acne, especially when I was during that period of hormonal changes with acne and my, late teens, early 20s. And it'd be like, okay, so every 5 days I could identify that. And it'd be fun, with a lot of women, you could go with the seasons, right? You can watch the same old men. If your partner or men around you can see, ooh, okay, how are these applying to him? When is he more moody? And he's not fully aware of his own cycle because he's not keeping track of it. How is he acting? That there's a particular 20-day or whatever the particular pattern might be. And a lot of people, oh man, it's not a typical laughing response. Maybe. Well, whether it's, because it's all in common, they don't think just because he doesn't have an external bleeding form, which they do, like I said, whether it's nasal or some other way, or you might have to donate blood more at that time. But you can keep it, it's easier to keep your track of your partner's moods, right? Or for oneself, like I said, for me, it was direct, which I don't have anymore. And that's how I keep a lot of my females around me, especially from my prone to acne. I can usually tell, typically is for, I identify that quite accurately, that's their time of ovulation, unless they have the month. Pretty simple to identify those days of their ovulation.
So you've noticed women tend to break out more around ovulation?
Yeah, as the hormones change.
Hormonal change.
Yeah, hormonal change. Typically during ovulation, the acne levels increase a lot greater.
And I would think also when you're bleeding or when a woman's
Detoxing.
having her period, she might also have a breakout, and that would again be probably triggered by hormonal change.
So it seems to be a lot less than during ovulation. In those women, that is where they do break out. It seems to be very consistent.
Interesting. Okay. Thanks for sharing that. It's good to know what the cycle's like more for men.
And then as far as, specific Taoist theories, and depending on old texts, they used to believe that that particular Taoist sect, they believe that holding the semen is there to keep their energy within themselves and not to give it at all would be the way to do. And of course, this would be depending on each individual. So to listen to them before you follow the Tao, that would not be said. It's not the Tao. So it's important to see within oneself. If I ejaculate too often,
how do you feel?
With pornography or something else, what else am I releasing it from? Sometimes all I need is just human contact, and I was doing that with distraction or depression or something else, where all I needed was to maybe detox them or just to help them. But once in a while, just like any drug, it can be used for health purposes, and it can be done in an unhealthy way. So instead of listening to a particular way, men or certainly to really tune into one's body and see, I need to do this many times a day, or this many times a week, or this many times a month, and to really tune into your body. General guidelines are useful, but to take it too seriously would be just silly for when you should tune into yourself.
Yeah.
And that would change.
Yeah, thank you for presenting that. I think that's important. There are there's some really extreme Taoist schools that are like, don't ever ejaculate, and it's a lot about withholding, and they're tend to be kind of severe, austere schools, and it's really not. I guess I was speaking more from like what I've encountered with Tantra and Taoist practices, how they're practiced now. Nowadays,
I would say, you're losing this much energy.
There's going to be a lot of superstition around, some of the more like, from some of the older schools that are just.
But practicing, I agree with you that practicing becoming multi-orgasmic as a man is important. And to not associate, in the Western world associates ejaculation with orgasm. For me, they're only half the time are they in sync. I can have orgasms and I can ejaculate without orgasm, and vice versa. And so,
That's great. Not that many men know how to do that. So it's great. And you can learn just from tuning, deeply into your own body. And then there's also, practices that you can learn from, although it's hard to learn from a book. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. Because I think it is really important that, noticing like how you feel, and noticing like what works for your body or doesn't work for your body, and like being in tune in that way, I think as a man also is important. And that's really the final authority. For you're your own authority on your body. So
the last thing would be the multi-orgasmic man would be a good book for men and women to read. I haven't read it in 20 years now. It was really.
Are you talking about Montauk Chia?
I believe so.
And he wrote it with Rachel Abrams as well. Yeah, those are good books. The Multi-Orgasmic Couple, The Multi-Orgasmic Woman, The Multi-Orgasmic Man. Good basic books for learning ejaculatory choice and mastery. And it really is about choice and what you need and what works for you and what feels good. And one thing that in an Ayurvedic remedy, if a man has ejaculated and feels depleted, an Ayurvedic remedy is to do a nut milk with dates. A nut milk. Just throw some nuts in a blender, and they use almonds, but almonds without the outside peel, ideally, because they're more digestible, and with sweetened with dates, and that can be a good for replenishing the ojos, or the vital energy of the body. And the other thing that he brought up that I thought was really important is the connection with the moon as women and men, apparently. The moon is really, as all beings, the moon affects, the animals, like when there's a full moon, the animals are breeding, everything is affected by the cycle of the moon, going from waxing to waning, from a new moon or dark moon to a full moon. And humans are affected dramatically in that we tend to naturally bleed with the new moon, with the dark moon, and ovulate with the full moon. So historically, before we had all of this light pollution is what they call it, all of this artificial light, women would naturally, we'd have cleansing rituals in our tribes during the new moon or dark moon. What?
This is exciting.
Great.
I want this type of community.
Yes, the red tents. We have to bring the red tent communities back. So women would do this all together in a tribe, because if you notice, when you're around another woman, your cycles will sync up. And your cycles will sync with the moon too. Despite all the artificial light, this still happens. It's easier to get thrown off with the artificial light, but it definitely still happens. So you'll probably, if you start noticing your cycle, you'll probably be, bleeding or ovulating with either the full moon or the dark moon, because it can flip sometimes. Naturally, it's bleeding with the new moon or dark moon and ovulating with the full moon. But sometimes it flips. Like right now, today is my first day of my moon time, and it's a full moon out there right now. And so that can happen sometimes. If you're too kind of doing too much and you need more internal time, your body can flip it and say, oh no, you're not going to go to that all night full moon party. Oh no. You're going to be bleeding. You're going to be in bed. You're going to be have no energy. We're going to get some restoration time here. So your body's very intelligent, and it can flip that. So that can happen. And if you're not in sync with the moon, go out and look at the full moon. Go outside every night and look for the moon. Where is she? What part of the cycle is she in? And I'll tell you, within a month, you will be in sync with the moon, because it's just that, just that intention of that connection will sync you up. It'll overpower the artificial light. So that's a good thing to know, because then you're more likely to be ovulating if it's a full moon. So you're not just going to that full moon all night party because it's a full moon. It's because you have the energy, the desire. Yeah, so that's good to know. And Orion, have you've felt like, well, so one thing that we've noticed is that when I bleed, Orion will tend to like hurt himself and bleed too, right? Like he'll get like a bloody nose, or he'll like hurt himself. He like bleeds every month. It's ridiculous.
Be really careful on those days.
Be really careful. And then you've also said, did you say that you felt like there was some connection with a solar cycle for you too? Or
There's all kinds of cycles.
all kinds of cycles. Yeah, we're connected to all of the planets and all of the planetary influences. But anyway, okay, enough about that. So our connection with the moon is really a big part of this too. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to share?
No, just thank you. This was amazing. I'm so glad that we had this conversation to
Yeah, Tiffany seeded this. She was like, I want this information. I want you to teach this. And I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So thank you for making this happen. And hopefully hopefully I'll be able to maybe use this video for something. I really feel like this is the kind of information I want people to have access to. You know, it's like everybody should know this stuff.
Like in more like a home setting, sitting on the
Yeah.
floor, on pillows, or
Back checks.
yeah,
Mhm.
just like I think that would be more intimate.
Mhm.
Online course.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and speaking of that, I do have the Goddess Empowerment Academy Facebook group, and I'm offering different, free videos in there, and not this one. I'm not necessarily going to offer this one in there, but I am offering some videos on empowerment around female sexuality, and also I'm doing a sensual embodiment and ecstasy challenge for women, so like a week-long challenge. So there's going to be lots of good stuff going on in there, and I'm creating an online school for information like this, also around natural birthing, because I'm a holistic doula or birth partner. And so I also have information around that, and we're going to have information around menopause and around astrologically around all the archetypes of the empowered feminine. I'm going to bring that in. So lots of good stuff in that. And
Francis, oh my God, she's gonna start glowing. Like, good luck, you know.
I think I hired you already, like, for birth or something. I don't know. This is just amazing.
thank
Feel really
you.
connected.
So I want to check in with everybody because it's like 4:30 now. I know it's been a lot of information. It's been a lot of sitting. I do have more I could share about the biology and attachment and how we bond, hormones and attachment and bonding. That was the other thing, that I was going to share about. And but it feels like it might be a good time to end if people are feeling like full and like, okay, yeah, let's just. I didn't know how long this would take exactly because it's my first time doing this in this particular kind of presentation, and so I didn't know how long it would take. So we could end a half an hour early. We could also just like take like a short break, and then I could talk more about this stuff. But that could also be a different class. So it's definitely related. It's important in general, I'd say, but not.
Does anyone need to leave? You guys, anybody need to leave?
Anybody? Okay.
You need to leave.
Continue? Okay. Cool. So let's just take a 5-minute break. Seriously, 5 minutes. Don't go out there and get lost. Let's take 5 minutes, and we'll start at 4:35, and we'll just finish this last piece and end by 5. We'll end by 5.
I have a question. Since I was pushing and it's late,